Here's the issue with that. It actually has degraded to the point where if we were to look at the Earth, and you imagine the atmosphere as being bigger than the Earth, and say that in your mind you thought of the atmosphere as having, say, 60% more volume than the Earth, so it's out there a ways. The magnetosphere hovers on the other side of the planet and is probably, let's just say, 400 times the volume of the atmosphere in terms of the area that it encompasses. So what I'm about to tell you will sort of make sense. Our magnetosphere, even though it surrounds our Earth, has several Earth-size holes in it. Some of these Earth-size holes are multiple Earth-size holes, and it's causing real problems. There are areas of the planet down Patagonia, even now into the Caribbean with the South Atlantic anomaly, and there's one area over the, I think it's over Ghana now in Africa that's smallish, but nonetheless the magnetosphere is quote degrading, and it is allowing extra radiation to come in. This is not a good situation at all. It will certainly be associated with mutations. It'll certainly be associated with all kinds of rises in first generation mutations like cancers and this kind of thing, as opposed to multiple generation mutations that might even be viable, but certainly will produce birth defects. It will certainly impact fertility in a general scale because of the kinds of radiations coming on in. And it is not a good thing because it's becoming, the magnetosphere holes are becoming more stable, and that's the really frightening part. It is apparent that we're going through a transitional phase, not only as humans on this planet and all of our mucking about with each other, but also the planet and the solar system itself. It may indeed be that this apparent magnetosphere crisis could, for instance, we could have our context change in December not relate to the dollar and not be the result of a natural disaster, but might relate to our sudden realization as to, for instance, how we now have to start living with ourselves because of a looming economic, or excuse me, a looming environmental collapse. So in other words, if the context change were to tweak a certain way, it might be a green crisis, so to speak, where something triggers the powers that be to let the word out as to just how fragile the whole Earth system is, and there's nothing we can do about it. I don't think they're ready to release that kind of information, and it really does appear to come out in the revolutionary period of time, but I'm just throwing it out because we don't yet have a handle on the 1229 context change.
Okay.
But anyway, the magnetosphere is troubling because there's another aspect of it that's a little bit interesting, to say the least. And that is that when the magnetosphere is weak, a CME could come through from the sun and cause vast quantities of damage. Further, it is theoretically feasible that a CME from the sun, a coronal mass ejection, that is preceded by what do they call those? Not flares. The
solar flare.
Prominences. Yeah, correct. Not, but the prominence itself throws off a magnetic field. If that's followed by a magnetic bow wave that's being pushed along, so to speak, by the coronal mass ejection, and the magnetic bow wave would not dissipate the way that they normally would. Thus, the coronal mass ejection itself, those ultra high energy particles, are pushing along an intense magnetic bubble, if you will, or part of a bubble ahead of them. This is key because that magnetism itself can cause problems with our magnetosphere. In its weakened stage, if we were to receive a southern or south pole impacting south pole or negative energy magnetic bubble from the sun, our magnetosphere would go spinning around like it was a top. I mean, I kid you not, it would become totally displaced and go whipping around.
And what do you think that would do to our weather and whatnot?
Certainly would screw the weather up, there's no question about it. And during the period of time that the CME was coming in, with the magnetosphere spinning, so to speak, relative to the Earth, as if the Earth were stable, it would allow the radiation to come on in various different areas. In other words, the holes would, in the magnetosphere, right now, might allow radiation to come in and hit the southern part of South America and part of the Caribbean. But if it was set in motion, these holes would be rotating around the planet during the period of time that CME is coming in, and so in a sense,
are you there?
With the high energy particles.
You just cut out for a second.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I just hoping they weren't trying to cut you off again.
No, and I've actually got no indication that I'm being cracked at this point. All my
Good.
ports are good.
Good deal.
So,
good deal.
so they still haven't found us. But in any event, the CME and the rotating magnetosphere can cause problems that may indeed trigger a magnetic pole shift. And a magnetic pole shift is dangerous not only because the whole magnetosphere inverts and is basically gone over half of the Earth at one time and then gone over the Earth, but it also allows all that radiation to come through, which will lead to all kinds of problems, not only communication-wise, but also on a personal level. Now, the magnetosphere has been increasingly weakened. At the same time, we're seeing the heliosphere and the heliopause, these giant magnetic bubbles around the sun, also be impacted. So basically, it's kind of like, let's all hope we don't get any CMEs for a few years until the magnetosphere builds up, or we're really in for it. And unfortunately, if we look again into history and look at archaeology, we find that there's a period of time that coincides with a lot of ancient legends that had all kinds of people living in caves because of extrasolar radiation coming in.
Yeah.
And they would, stick a stick out of the cave to see if it was safe to go out at that point.
Well, we've just got so many things coming at once. It's craziness.
Yeah, there's that fellow, I've talked to him, a couple whistleblower guys, that are interviewed on like Project Camelot and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to a couple of them. They contacted me and just wanted to chat and stuff. But from the shadow world realm, they are very much aware that, and by they I mean at least the stuff that's been reported to me through these guys,
mm-hmm.
that the management of the shadow world is very much aware that we're being hit with all kinds of crap all at once.
Yeah.
And that it's not merely a perfect storm, it's a perfect storm of perfect storms.
Wow. What about two fugitives? What do you have to say about that?
I'm being really cagey about that because I got to watch the language, because there are people
Mm-hmm.
listening, and these guys are still fugitives.
Yes.
But I've been actually contacted by... okay, let me see how I can say this and not get anybody in trouble. I've been contacted by a person who is in fact, or claims to be, a part of the pursuers, and they're really pissed.
Wow.
And they were basically, I don't know if it was a warning or that's kind of how I took it, but basically the guy was saying that, if anybody mails me anything, you better send it back to us right away, kind of thing. But we should see greater visibility of these guys in the November, December, as we get into a lot of the alien stuff starting to appear.
Mm-hmm.
And by alien, I'm using it as a broad term to include, the fundamental information that'll come out about the new electrics, which, by the way, may have occurred. So I may have been off by about 15 days because there's been a couple of articles that have come on out about a new form of magnetic battery and a new form of magnetic electricity.
Yeah.
And if these pan out, then these could be indeed the fundamental breakthroughs that power the new electrics. And if that's the case, then they're appearing in October instead of November, so I was off by about a month. But nonetheless, the guys that are the fugitives with their little device, we will see a denouement of that particular, the last act of that particular play by July of next year, not even into July, so probably in June or so forth, and we'll see an increased level of visibility in November, so that if you sort of pay attention to what's out and about, even in the mainstream press, you should start seeing hints of this stuff from November, probably about the mid-November onward, somewhere in there, through to about July. And it should be pretty much out in the open, I think, in June or July of next year.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole lot of secrets revealed that will come out in the early part of the year that will make it less of a big deal, so to speak. That, yet another alien vice has surfaced is going to be pretty much our attitude, I think.
Yeah. I'm also getting questions here. Number one, people want to know what's concerning you the most in all this, and the Obama assassination. What do you have to say about that?
Well, we still have those in the data. It still looks like that's a probability at some level, at least the attempt. It's best not to go too far into that. I think it's really stupid, and I don't really see. And actually, let me put it this way: any successful assassination attempt on a president these days, in a general sense, is undoubtedly the work of another faction within the powers that be. In other words, it's a master punishing a errant slave, because those presidents work for people, and they are well protected by people that are not, I would suspect, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would suspect that most of the Secret Service guys are just very narrowly focused, very competent, and don't really concern themselves too much with the woo-woo world, and are not really aware that their boss, the guy they're trying to protect, is in fact a, 28th layer down political minion. And so I don't see them as really being the Secret Service, as being part and parcel of this, and so I'm sure they're doing just an excellent job. And thus, to get through that kind of excellence, it would take another level of excellence backed by a fairly large power base. So I don't buy the lone shooter kind of thing, right? There's a lot of nut jobs out there, but they don't usually express themselves this way. Usually they'll express themselves on targets of opportunity that are far closer to them. They'll go shoot up their local church. They're not going to drive halfway across the country and get really squirrely and learn the lay of the land and all of this in order to be able to kill a president. So if we see that kind of assassination attempt, I'm going to read it as the powers that be are starting to get a little bit desperate and are getting stupid and blatant.
Now, so what concerns you most with all this that's going on?
Living long enough to see it all come out.
I would have to agree with you there.
I'm interested. I'm fascinated. I can't help it. I grew up on all these science fiction stories. We're at the cusp of a huge level of change that, in our understanding of world history, we've never been here before. Now, there indeed may have been other civilizations on the planet that made it to this stage before, but they never successfully transited. And so here is our turn. Will we make it or not?
Speaking of science fiction, I'm a big fan of Star Wars, and I've heard you talk about Alien Wars in 2011 and how it could be dominating our thoughts. Interplanetary wars. I mean, is this something that's imminent and that's going to happen, or?
Well, the language is already starting to show up.
Right on.
We've had NASA announce that they are going to bomb the evil Selenites on the moon for some kind of perceived fault. Really what they said was, we're going to go and look for water, but we're going to do it in a strange way by launching missiles at the moon. So, and they use the word bombing and so on. So that language is already starting to show. But good or bad or indifferent, our data suggests that the level of that language will be very dominating in 2011 and actually really starts getting almost daily, I should suspect, in late November of 2010. So it's a 2011 issue, but because we work on a lunar year, our years really run a little bit different from the calendar years, and so 2011 will certainly be dominated by the alien wars, but we may indeed even see it a couple of months before 2011, starting sometime in late November 2010. And by alien wars, we're using those words at the largest level of archetype. Doesn't necessarily imply that you're going to get a gun and go shoot at aliens, or that they're going to be shooting back or anything. It may indeed end up being that way, but our data at this point, we can't tell if it's going to be that level of contention or some other level of contention. And it's very easy with our monkey minds to imagine all kinds of contention within humans and between humans and from humans to the ETs when the ETs show up. It's going to be a time of great stress, and curiously, we have a huge tipping point in 2011. Whoop. Have we lost?
No, I'm still here. I can hear you.
Oh, okay, all right, I see what's going on. Hang on a second, I have to block a port. They know I'm using Skype and they're trying to come in.
Great. How would you guys feel about maybe a 5 or 10 minute break here real fast? Do you need a break, Cliff?
Yeah, actually, well, I can use a break, but I have to feed the dogs and stuff, so maybe we should just go for another 10 minutes and then, because of the problems and stuff here, reschedule and do it again real soon?
That would be great. I'd love to do another interview with you, and we can get some more questions lined up in advance. 2 things here let's be sure to cover in our time is Dog Poet, and let's